Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final technology session this morning. I've got three amazing startups that I wanted to introduce you to. Thanks to Gilad for his presentation. He was keen to join us this morning, but he's away at the moment. He was trying to join, but I'm going to jump in one more time. And don't worry, we're going to hand it over to of my colleagues this afternoon and tomorrow, so you don't have to hear from me the entire time. But I wanted to give the floor to three really fascinating travel startups that are really disrupting large categories in our space. Travel advisors, many of you are joining and listening to this. So we're going to have Ragan Stone, the CEO and founder of Nicer.Travel, talk about her journey. And then we're going to go to Daniel Green, who's based in Tel Aviv, and he's going to talk about how is disrupting the travel insurance. And then we're going to go over to Cynthia, who is Canadian, but based in Lisbon. And she's going to talk about how her company is really disrupting travel in the blockchain and accommodation space. But let's start with Ragan. Over to you, please.
Thanks, Dan, and thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here. As Dan mentioned, my company is called Nicer.Travel. You guys, if you're not familiar with it, I'm happy to share a little bit, and I'm going to share a brief slide really quickly. And so what we've got here and what is Nicer is really a people ask, is it platform, is it a travel agency? I think the best way to describe it is kind of a hybrid of the two. We believe that AI powered tools will empower and enable the travel advisor. I started my career as a travel advisor, so I definitely understand and know the power that advisors have, and then the sales they're able to produce with consumers. So we're leveraging tools help their process keep pace with the direct booking options that they have available. I love this quote, and I'll only give you one more slide after this. I know our time is kind of short, but we look at a lot of new applications out there in AI and in technology. And for a while, what we may see is that the best way to really present those is through other humans, which is, kind of validating for the travel advisor argument. So I love to show that to people. And then, this kind of gives an idea. Travel advisors right now work very, very well, but the process is largely fragmented and it's not digitally enabled at all. So what we're looking at is how do we scale advisors, and we can't do it without technology. We live in a world of full digital enablement, and so the advisor world, I don't see a reality of us being able to keep up in a way, to keep pace with what's around us unless we use AI to help empower those advisors. So that kind of gives you an idea in a nutshell. And then I'm happy to answer any questions and looking forward to the panel.
Thank you, Ragan. Great to have you with us. I know there are a ton of travel agents and travel agencies that are joining this, so I'm going to make sure we have some good time for questions. But let me bring in Daniel, because I want to set the stage for all three of you first, and then we'll spend as much time on the Q&A. I'm ever so intrigued with what you've been building at Faye in such a regulated space, but tell us how you're disrupting travel insurance.
Sure. So thank you very much for having me. I'm Dan. I'm one of the founders of Faye, and I'll talk very briefly about the human side of travel insurance. So Faye is a company that is currently selling travel insurance in the US to US citizens and residents. And I think if we've learned anything from the day that today's travelers expect and need more when away from home. So travel insurance has really gone from this product that people hated. It was a PDF that appeared somewhere in your inbox around the time that you bought the trip, and then you never thought about it again until something went wrong. And even then, most of the time, really what happened was you waited until you got home, had enough paperwork to substantiate a claim, and for some people, this was the start of a multi-month frustrating process. And I think we can all admit that the only time that you truly care about your travel insurance is when something goes wrong, and that's the important time where you can shine. So Faye is mobile first. We're really designed to be purchased very quickly and easily, but in a way that is transparent. And then once that is done, we're there to support you. And that's everything from being able to interact with us, being able to interact with the app, and being able to actually get help or file claims and receive payments whilst you're still on your trip. So there are two areas in which we're working very hard to integrate some of the best tools and technologies around AI. And the first is obviously around customer experience. We are not, and I'm happy to talk about it more later, we're not inviting our customers to talk directly to AI. We think that the technology, whilst showing amazing promise, is still a little nascent. For those of you who've been in some of earlier sessions, you've heard about things like hallucinations. And it was even in the news this week of a airline giving wrong information to a customer via a chatbot and being on the hook for that decision. And as an insurance company, I can share that we have also had scenarios where a piece of information has been handed to a plan holder from one of our agents that is not 100% accurate, and we are expected, according to the law, to behave within the bounds of what we said, regardless of what may or may not have been written in the terms and conditions on our website. But really, the most important area in which we're seeking to innovate is the processing of claims. Claim payment is an incredibly regulated space in the US, and it is regulated differently in every single state of the United States. So in order to get the processing time down for some of the easier to manage smaller claims, this is where really we can leverage some of the latest technologies that we will bucket together and call them AI, but obviously there's a range of different technologies that can be used to verify that you are where you say you are on the trip, that you have the appropriate documentation, that the documentation is real, and all of that can run through sometimes in a matter of seconds or minutes. So you can have that delightful experience of having your claim paid sometimes shortly after filing it. And for everyone else, also having the opportunity that the claims examiners, that the people who are actually working to service you after something goes wrong, wherever possible, are not keeping you waiting and holding for days, weeks, months, because there's such a backlog of paperwork to get through. Whatever tools we can use to make everyone's life faster ultimately results in a much, much better experience for the customer. Really, it's a heavily regulated space, and regulation for AI is coming. So we are constantly thinking about what that means by applying the traditional regulations, which are really often designed around protecting the consumer, making sure insurance carriers and providers act honestly, transparently, and honorably. But a lot of that is trying to be one step ahead of the regulation, looking at what regulators are already doing now in different spaces, understanding what might happen to our space, and then trying to be one step ahead of it, because we will always be a compliant company. That's what it means to be in insurance. And we don't want to give up the amazing power and potential for these tools. So what we're really focused on now is applying these tools honorably, ethically, and effectively.
That's great. Thank you very much, Daniel. I commend you for your efforts to disrupt that space, because it's a very challenging industry. And I think you guys each have a unique story to tell. And so now I wanted to go over to Cynthia, who her and her husband is, there was a crypto bro earlier on our session, a self-described crypto bro. And so it was the reason I really wanted to have you here, of course, is because the concept of blockchain actually really empowers in many ways. So I would love for you to be able to speak to that and to talk to everyone about what you're working on at DTravel.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Dan. I will say I will never self-describe as a crypto pro. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Hi everyone, I'm Cynthia. I'm CEO of DTravel, and I'm really excited to talk about how Web3 and AI can deliver on personalization in travel. DTravel is a Web3 travel ecosystem specifically focused on the vacation rental industry, and we basically empower peer-to-peer direct bookings. And we do that through a suite of products, and one of them is what I'm going to be talking about today. So to give you a quick overview of what I'll be talking about, we'll spend 30 seconds talking about Web3 and AI, So I'm calling it a masterclass in a cheeky way because obviously we can't really cover a lot in 30 seconds, but I just wanted to set the context of some concepts that I think are really important to this discussion around personalization, specifically in Web3 and AI. And basically that context should give you an overview of why these two technologies together are basically the perfect marriage to be able to enable personalization in travel. And then I'll end with a little demo video of something that we've been talking about, which shows this in action. So I will probably get kicked out of Web3 for talking about Web3 in 30 seconds, but I want to give you a very high-level 50,000-foot view of blockchain. And from a context perspective in Web2, which is basically what we have today, we have all of these databases that store information. And they tend to be locked, meaning that you need permission to access to be able to get that data. And they also tend to be siloed, which means that the data doesn't talk to each other. So even if you get access to one database, you can't see the data within all of that database. And oftentimes that data is actually not even compatible because of different standards or how the database itself is structured. In comparison with Web3 and blockchains, which are the core foundation of the Web3 industry, they are what's called open and permissionless, meaning that anybody can get access to it and be able to read and write data to the blockchain. And the big advantage here is that obviously anybody can build on the blockchain and be able to access the data. And also it uses one standard across the entire blockchain so that you know for sure that the data is compatible. So the big takeaway here is that blockchains are really good at storing a lot of what we call interoperable data, meaning that the data works together. Now, if we think about AI, there's basically two broad categories of AI. There's narrow AI, which some people call dumb AI, and then there's artificial general intelligence, or AGI, which is known as smart AI. And dumb AI are sort of like chatbots that you probably interacted with and unfortunately had the misfortune to deal with, whereas AGI is more of where we're at today with ChatGPT and other AI tools. And I think some experts argue about whether or not we've actually reached AGI because of some of the definitions, but I think we're pretty close if we're not already there. And the reason this is important is that when we had just dumb AI or narrow AI, a lot of the personalization that I'll be talking about wasn't possible because AI couldn't actually learn. It only had algorithms and databases to learn off of. And so it had basically like a very limited set of things that it could come back with. Whereas with AGI today, it actually can learn and be able to make recommendations based on more and more data, which is really incredible. And so there are some AI techniques that are very relevant to this concept of personalization within travel. So first we have machine learning, deep learning, and neural networks. Then we have natural language processing, or NLP, computer vision, and then sentiment analysis. So these are just some AI techniques. There's a lot more, but these ones specifically are relevant to this concept about personalization that I'm talking about. And the main takeaway for this context is that AI is really good at analyzing a lot of data, and most importantly, learning from it. So if we do some quick math, blockchains plus AI basically enable true travel personalization. And the way that this works is if we go back to how blockchains are structured, if let's say that we have this example of all of these different travel companies in the industry who are building on a blockchain, then all of that data actually becomes accessible, and that data works interoperably across the entire travel industry. So kind of like this concept of a connected trip that we've been talking about for a really, really long time. Now, if you have all of this mass data, meaning all of the touch points that implies a traveler or somebody else that the traveler has ever interacted with, and we feed that into an AI, then we basically get this, all of the techniques that AI can use. So the deep learning and neural networks, which can basically process like a human brain. We have NLP, which can then converse like a human being. We have computer vision, which can analyze images to make recommendations and learn from it, and then sentiment analysis to analyze text. And this is really important because if you look at blockchains and all the data that it can store across a lot of different data points, and you combine that with AI, then what you're going to have is AI can analyze all of those data points and make very more recommendations. Because now it can say, look at your reviews for reviews that you've left on any other platform. It can look at images from trips that you've taken, and it can basically start to build a profile of things that are highly specific to you. And that's something that we were not able to do previously with the AI that we had And it's really combining these two, blockchain technology to store all that data, plus AI, which can analyze all that data and make recommendations that really can deliver on this promise of personalization that we've been talking about for a long, long time in the industry. So I'm going to show a short video of something that we've been working on that kind of puts us in action. We aren't quite there yet, but this is the foundation of how we're going to be able to combine both blockchain technology as well as AI to be able to personalize search recommendations specifically for accommodations. So DTravel's properties and data is going to be one of the first partners essentially for enabling the blockchain side of it. But as we onboard more partners, then we're going to be able to have a lot of data around a traveler's experiences and their travel history. And then the AI will be able to make very specific recommendations for accommodations that are based on their specific preferences and travel history. And so I'm very, very excited about this. I think we're at a very pivotal moment in time where it's very exciting that some of this technology can finally help us deliver on some of the things that we've been talking about in the travel industry. And so if you want to learn more, please reach out. We'd love to partner with you. And thanks so much to Dan and team for having me.
Thank you, Cynthia. Great to have you here. I'm going to go back to Ragan because obviously there's 3 topics here. Travel advisors. Ragan was on our podcast in season 3. I encourage everyone to listen to that episode. It was fantastic, very well received. And I think that highlights also with this conference, Travel Week and PAX Mag are partners in this conference, and we have hundreds of travel agents registered that will either be here now or will watch these sessions. And so there's a few questions I really wanted to ask Ragan, because even when I came into this business, Ragan, which I think you know my story as well, I worked at Carlson Wagonly, and I was, people looked at me as the person who was going to take their jobs because I was introducing e-commerce platforms. And that was not the case. You see what the travel advisors. So demystify that a bit more. If people look at Nicer and say it's an AI powered travel agency, help kind of demystify the difference between what's human led and what is AI led, and to alleviate any of those concerns that maybe the initial ones to be, is this going to take my job away?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that. I think first and foremost, what I like to tell people is that we're not an itinerary builder, nor do we operate AI agents in order to plan your trip. Having worked in the travel industry for quite a while, I do understand that there's a lot of value with many AI tools, itinerary builders, and there's value that a lot of people can use. However, to your point, and to I think the point that Daniel made earlier, it's very early on. And so there's some things that are nuanced that are really hard to determine. And for a traveler, it's astonishing the amount of travel content that's available on the internet. It's kind of overwhelming. And we all know hotel prices are certainly not going down right now, nor are the cost of air travel. So it's a massive investment of not only financially, but also your time to take a risk on something that you don't know to be truthful in terms of where you're heading and where you're traveling. Travel advisors have expert knowledge and are true experts in their field. I get it. Travel advising is not like the sexiest career around, and the perception at times can be like, I'm like a brochure lady trying to get you hooked on some type of weird deal on something that's not very attractive. But the truth is that behind the scenes, where you don't realize it, is that we serve a luxury clientele looking to book what are known as ultra personalized and exclusive trips. And so I think that it's more of uncovering that. We know from the consumer that they want to book trips with travel advisors, and most advisors that I know don't really have enough to even take on. So to me, the biggest challenge is the advisor's access to the consumer and the consumer access to the advisor. And so really steps in and helps bridge that gap.
That's great. And just one follow-on question, just in terms of what's always intrigued me about the Nicer model is the humans plus AI. And so just to address that with when travel advisors are considering engaging or working with Nicer.Travel, where does technology's place and where does the human-centered component, and how do you decide on which area to make sure it's human-centric or leverage technology for?
Right. We don't aim to replace any of the advisor's unique value with AI. What we aim to do is automate those things that are administrative, that are task oriented, that are necessary to perform the job, but are very time consuming. So the way we think of it is that allowing us to automate those key components of the job allows the advisor more time to free up their creative value and their human value and insight. And so we're preserving really the human aspect of travel planning and advising while automating the kind of task oriented but necessary pieces of the trip. If you're looking at it from a business perspective, those things are necessary, but they don't really make you money, right? And so what we're doing is we're allowing the advisor to spend more time on their unique insight and less time, combing through the details of the back office.
That's great. Thanks for that. And speaking of making money, there's money in insurance. It's a
oh my gosh, you can make a ton of money selling travel insurance.
So let's bring all the people listening are obviously in the travel industry, so that it's a good margin product. Everyone's encouraged to sell insurance, and it's obviously ultimately has a good value add for the consumer, especially if you run into an issue. All of a sudden, we're seeing companies like Hopper come along that are becoming fintech companies. And then they're also running into issues with some of the big OTAs, which based on how they approach selling insurance. And I saw there was a question immediately for you, Dan, that you jumped on about will travel insurance eventually partner with OTAs and airlines to protect trips? So I would love for you to address that one for the wider audience, but I'd also love you to touch on a bit more about regulation. I know you talked about it in your presentation, in your overview, but I think it'll be valuable for a lot of people because I think people give up. If you look at like the PayPal and credit cards, it's like there's challenges disrupting an established category. And that's why I say I commend you for doing that. So tell us a bit more about how you're approaching a regulated industry and then specifically OTAs.
So I think it's really important to understand that most regulation was put in place for a good reason. The problem is sometimes it was put in place for a really good reason 50 years ago that doesn't apply now, and this regulation will be with us until the end of time. But for those people who are wanting to work in regulated industries, startups and the like, my advice to you is befriend a lawyer early on. There's a lot of interpretation when it comes to laws and regulations, but if you are not the person qualified to make those interpretations, don't, because in regulated spaces, when those things end badly, it ends really badly. And I think we were lucky and smart enough early on to actually bring on board one of the lawyers who wrote most of the legislation to do with travel insurance. And it's just easier to make decisions with that in your corner. And it's really important because at the end of the day, regulators have the power to shut you down with no notice, and that's no good for you, and that's no good for your customers. As for OTAs and the like, I really think the people who stand to get the biggest gains selling insurance are the consortia, are the travel advisors, are the individual agents who are working with technology platforms who can potentially carve out a relationship with the insurance company where when something happens to their customer is the one that's looked after. I think the OTA space will always suffer a little bit from trying to serve masses of people, and it's very hard to have individual relationships and the ability that you have the person who booked your trip and now something's gone wrong and you'd like to talk to that person again because maybe they can work with the travel insurance company to make sure that the payments for the claim all go hand in hand and you're not out of pocket. And I really think OTAs do things with travel insurance now. We've seen what Hopper is doing in the space, but I think it's not the airlines retailing travel, it's the individual advisors, it's the agencies, it's the consortia who can probably deliver the most value for their customers and also make money along the way. I mean, it's important that everyone's incentivized, but what's most important is that the customer gets the coverage they need. And when they have a claim, the claim is treated fairly and hopefully processed quickly.
Cool. Super helpful. And I do want to come back to you on that, but I want to bring Cynthia in now to talk about something that has been brought up at conferences for at least the last decade. And this was actually a question that Gilad had suggested, and it's one that is relevant because of the fact that we've got the Focusrite team joining. And they'll be in the next session. And Lorraine asked this question of Glenn Fogel about the connected trip, because they would always talk about booking and the connected trip. And she eventually would say, when is it coming? When is this connected trip? So I'm going to actually ask that question of you. Is like, we've been talking about the connected trip for decades, but in reality, we still don't have it. Why is that the case? And how do we make progress?
Yeah, I think the main problem with the connected trip is that any one person who tries to tackle it is never going to solve it. At least that's my perspective, because if you have one provider who's trying to build the connected trip, that's impossible. Every consumer, every traveler is always going to interact with many, many companies, many different brands. And so it's impossible for one company to capture all of that, which is why in the presentation that I talked about, really our thesis is that blockchain is the solution for that, because you'll get all of the data in one place. And you can choose to make it permission for only the people who are within that ecosystem. So it's not like anybody can come along and be able to read that data. But the most important thing is that you have this one place that anybody can connect into and be able to read that data. And I think Google's tried to do that a little bit, where they will read your emails, for example. So they have a history of different trips that you've taken. But again, the problem is that, Google owns your data, so you can't really take it away with you. And they're monetizing off of your data. So you don't really truly own that. Whereas with Web3 and blockchain, you can essentially own your data. And so wherever you choose to move, you can bring that data with you. And so I think that there's a quote that says, if you try to solve a problem with the same mind that created it, you'll never do that. And so I think when we have this lens that we are trying to solve the connected trip issue with one provider, then we won't be able to solve it. It has to be everybody coming together to figure out, well, how do we connect to each other so that we can share this data? And for the consumer, for the traveler, the end person, how are we going to provide the best experience for them so that they can see this entire connected trip and it's a seamless experience for them? And so I think the challenge has been that as an industry, we have to come together and try to work together to solve it. But that's obviously a big challenge.
For sure. We've got a number of questions that have come in. I realize we've gone over time. I'll eat into a little bit of our very short lunch break for everyone, just to make sure we can address some of these questions, because I want to make sure that you guys have the opportunity to answer. Now, the one I wanted to go to, I guess back to you, Ragan. Laura asked the question about what does ultra personalization mean at Nicer.Travel, and Rodrigo made a comment about most of the AI generated itineraries are not really valuable, especially Colombia. So how do you approach that, especially with higher end customers looking to travel to those destinations? And how do you approach this ultra personalization? What does that actually mean?
Right. In the travel advisor world, we don't really think of personalization the way that a lot of tech products or consumer products think of personalization. So like Delta will say that your experience is personalized because they're serving you a vegetarian meal and you're a vegetarian. And that's not necessarily personalization, right? That's just meeting your needs and requirements. So what a travel advisor does is really take that up a notch. And I gave a little example in my response, but if we know that a client has is very anxious about leaving their kids for the first time or is traveling for a special event, an advisor is able to do things, leverage their relationships with the hotels, with the on-site suppliers, to really make sure that they have the traveler has a unique experience. An example of this is I have clients traveling right now, actually, and they're very good. They're repeat clients, and they have quite a large budget. And this weekend happens to be a large basketball game. They're huge sports fans, and so the hotel knows that, and the hotel has planned on Saturday to put a little amenity in their room as a nod to their favorite team for the game on Saturday. So you can look at it as like, hey, these things are old school, but the truth is that they occur, and that's what brings the consumer back over and over again, because that's far beyond just me telling the hotel, hey, they're gluten-free or they don't drink alcohol. You know, those in these days, they just don't cut it in terms of personalization. So we really look beyond that for those unique things about someone. And we use a set of consumer data in order to access that, as along with the relationship that we have with the advisor and the client.
That's great. Thanks, Ragan. And one more for you, Cynthia, and then Daniel, I'll go to you to wrap up, and we'll. So there's two questions that relate to you and connected trips. So the one thing, Jonathan Chaspa, who runs Wolfpack, he's asked a question here about how you actually define a connected trip, and Sharuda from Focusrite, she's asked the question about, are companies really ready for this? I mean, looking at what happened to Jumeirah recently. So is the travel industry truly ready to share data along the entire trip, or is it lip service? Love to hear your view on that.
Yeah, so the first question, what is a connected trip? In my mind, I think from a traveler perspective, it should be that every aspect of your trip you can find in one place. And hopefully with the advancements in AI, what we can do is that you can say, hey, there's been a change in my travel plans, and it's going to automatically update every single leg of your journey. And they will also it will feel like a cohesive experience. So if, let's say, for example, you're traveling with your family, then the recommendations and the itinerary and everything that's involved with that trip feels very specific to like the people that you're traveling with and the type of travel you're doing. So it's using AI to basically be able to personalize this entire experience and have all the data from your past experiences to be able to inform that and to be able to connect all the pieces of your trip together. And I think
That's great. Yep.
In terms of sharing data from the entire industry, I think that it is definitely a big challenge, right? Which is probably why we obviously haven't had that realized yet. But I think there's definitely some changes that are coming that might make this a reality sooner rather than later. One is that I think just consumer preferences and desires are always one of the big reasons why technology changes or why companies change. And so if a lot of consumers are saying, hey, we want to have this, and the reality is like Google's already doing this. So if Google's going to do that, or if the travel industry can come together and actually have a solution that is better for the travel industry rather than somebody like Google coming in to do it, I think it's actually much better for our industry to come together and be able to work on this. So I definitely think the travelers will be a big part of pushing this change forward. And then hopefully as an industry, we're a lot more receptive to this as well, because I think that this, if we're always trying to deliver on great customer experiences, then this is going to be a really big key to that, because the current experience is pretty fragmented and definitely not ideal.
That's great. Thank you, Cynthia. To round us out, there's a couple other ones I'll be sure we can address afterwards. But Daniel, I'd love, you actually have no travel insurance questions, which, so I'm not going to relay one to you. Clearly, you've either answered everyone's or people are too terrified. But nevertheless, your bravery in challenging this space, I'd love you to leave us with your inspiring words and any more details for people to follow up with you and the team.
Sure. Firstly, for anyone based in the US, you're both welcome and encouraged to give us a spin next time you're in the market for travel insurance. I am not a licensed insurance broker, so I cannot, in fact, recommend it, but I stand by it anyway. I really think when it comes to insurance, as it comes to all things in travel, there will just have to be a trade-off between how much we can make on this trip today and how much we can make off the lifetime of a customer. And I would rather find a way to give you something more today. So maybe it's a more expensive product, but it means that when you have a claim and it gets paid quickly and you get taken care of, you come back again and again. And I think that the lesson that the travel industry has really mastered, especially when it's come to advisors, is just how much repeat customers matter. And I hope it's the lesson that the travel insurance industry takes as well, because that's at the heart of what we think about.
Thank you, Dan. And Ragan, final words from you and where people can get more information about Nicer.Travel.
Yeah, you can check out our website. It's literally Nicer.Travel, or you're welcome to contact me directly. I'll post my email address in the chat right here. And if anyone has any specific questions or just wants to follow up, I'm happy to schedule some time to talk.
Thank you, Ragan. And Cynthia, round us out here, and we'll give everyone 5 minutes to go check out the booths or grab a sandwich before we're back.
Yes, so you can find our website at DTravel.com, and you can reach out to me on any of the platforms. I always like to talk to people and meet people and talk about Web3 and AI. So yeah, definitely looking forward to meeting some of you.
That's awesome. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate you all being here, part of this conversation.
Thanks,
I
Dan.
look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you, Reagan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Daniel.
Bye.
Cynthia.
Bye.
Bye for now.